Up next is the 7mm PRC. These are hand loads, 175 ELDX. I'm shooting it out of a Mossberg Patriot with a 24-inch barrel.
That's 500.
Tack driver.
Man, that 7 PRC is a tack driver. Hitting those plates at 500, 600, first shots, easy. That thing must be shooting half MOA, right?
Here is what the 7 PRC is doing. Kind of typical of it to get 1.2 to 1.5 inch groups, but
yeah, but 500 to 600 yards with a 24-inch square plate isn't really that hard. Let's see what it does at 1,000 shooting 1.5-inch groups at a silhouette target.
7 PRC 1,000 yards.
Almost a month ago, I put up a short of my Mark V Deluxe and 340 Weatherby. We shot it, showed the velocities, and showed the pretty mediocre group. It was sub-MOA, but for a lot of people, it was just a terrible group, especially for hand loads. I only got a 0.8-inch group. Ugh, right? And no surprise, the commenters on that short came out in full force, telling me how terrible of a shot I am, how terrible the group was, that if not all 3 bullet holes were not a clover leaf or weren't touching, it was just a worthless group. Some of you might be thinking, man, this reloading Weatherby, he's just making excuses for his lazy reloading. He's just not putting enough time and effort to get really small groups, right? Well, honestly, guys, I've gotten plenty of small groups. I think this is where our industry has kind of gone wayward. Now, it's obviously a lot of fun to shoot bug hole groups, to show off how well your gun shoots, but for hunting, it's not really needed. I think as hand loaders, we take a little too much time and effort into getting groups like these, when in reality, what we should be doing is taking a solid load that we've built, like this one, where I'm getting anywhere from 0.6 to 1 MOA accuracy, and going out and practicing at distance to make sure it is consistent out at, I don't know, 500 yards. That's about as much as I'm going to limit myself with this personal load, which is the 300 Weatherby with a 200 grain terminal scent going 3,100 feet per second. Now, getting 0.6 to 1 MOA groups is nothing spectacular. And I certainly, if I put the time and effort into hand loading, I'm pretty confident I could get half MOA and smaller with this bullet. But personally, I think I'd rather practice this repeatable load out at distance instead of trying to do my best to get groups like that at 100. While we're on the subject of the obsession of getting the tiniest groups at 100 yards, a wise reloading mentor once told me not all half MOA groups are equal. So what does that mean? Well, just because you can get, say, a 0.3-inch group like the 6.5 PRC got at 100 yards, that doesn't mean at 500 yards you are guaranteed to get a 2-inch group. In fact, I want to tell you a story of one of the last times I went out long range shooting. This same 6.5 PRC that got a 0.3-ish inch group at 100 yards, at 1,000 yards and out to 1,200 yards, it struggled mightily to hit a 24-inch metal plate. In fact, I don't think it hit it once. But do you know what did extremely well that absolutely smoked the 6.5 PRC at that distance, at those same plates? A 28 Nosler that consistently gets anywhere from 3/4 inch groups to 1 inch groups.
Fire off your case.
How does that make sense? Well, just because you have an awesome load at 100 yards doesn't mean it's going to be awesome
Oh,
at
yeah.
distance. Now, it's not just me that has noticed that some pretty mediocre groups at 100 shoot way better than tiny groups at 100 out at distance. One channel that I've been following very closely and been learning from is Little Crow Gunworks. And he has done a 7mm series. And one thing that he has hit home about is that don't be obsessed with getting the tiniest groups possible at 100 yards. Find a good load and then go test it out at longer ranges. He recently did this with a 7mm Rem Mag. He had 2 different loads. One load that averaged sub half MOA, and then he had a feeling he should try this other load that is, well, pretty mediocre, kind of like what my 340 Weatherby has been shooting like, 3/4 inch to 1 inch groups. Guess which one shot way better at 640 yards? Yep, the pretty mediocre 3/4 inch to 1 inch group. It almost shot half the group sizes at 640 yards. Now, with all that being said, was I happy as a clam? Was I really content with how that 7 PRC was shooting? Absolutely not. Despite it shooting decently well out to 1,000 yards while getting 1.5 MOA, obviously I would have loved to have it under an inch. As for the 340 Weatherby, it's shooting those mediocre to bad groups depending on the person that looks at it. Well, I might be content with it. That all depends on how it does at long ranges. So can it keep shooting sub MOA at 400 or 500 yards with this 250 grain AccuBond? Well, that's something I definitely wanted to try out, and I actually was going to. Unfortunately, the old ball and chain kind of destroyed those plans. All right, so all jokes aside, this just needs more testing with this 250 grain AccuBond. I need to find out if this is a killer load, despite its mediocre groups at 100, or if it really is just a mediocre to poor grouping load. If you could get one thing out of this video, I hope it's that you're not chasing your tail trying to get that coveted 1/4 MOA group in a hunting rifle, when what you need to be doing is testing your loads at longer distance to make sure they are excellent.
Got it.
Wind's blowing to the right, so you may want to pull a little left. Got it.